Hi, everyone. We will get started in just a moment as we let people jump in. We're excited to welcome all of you guys to our Pride Month webinar. If you'll all take a minute to introduce yourselves in the chat, where you're from and what you do, that would be great. So we can all see who one another is. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started as more people jump in. Welcome, everybody. I'm Lacey Compton, the NAGC Director of Content and Learning, and NAGC is really excited to be able to offer this special webinar supporting youth who are LGBTQ plus and gifted in conjunction with the LGBTQ plus network. If you're not already a member of the LGBTQ plus network, we really encourage you to join. You can engage with them on the NAGC Engage platform or reach out to Doug or Andy for ways that you can take part in that network. So let's talk a little bit about our presenters tonight. Doug Alexander is an enthusiastic equity advocate for the students who are gifted and those who identify as LGBTQ+. He's the NAGC LGBTQ+ Network Chair-elect and works as a public school district gifted education specialist in Boulder, Colorado. He is currently pursuing his doctorate degree in education with a focus on gifted and LGBTQ+ student support. And Andy Parra Martinez is the chair of the LGBTQ+ network. He serves as a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Arkansas and as an assistant professor of educational psychology at Mississippi State University. Andy is passionate about justice, data analytics, student and teacher motivation, teacher education, wisdom development, gifted education, and educational policy. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy and Doug to share their presentation with you guys tonight.
Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us this evening and late afternoon, depending on where you're at. Thank you, Lacey, for that very nice introduction. And we do want our presentation to be, it is a webinar, so we are presenting and we have plenty to present, but we do want you to feel encouraged to ask questions and make comments either in the chat or use the Q&A feature in the webinar, which we can address along the way. So please do as we celebrate Pride Month and talk about the needs of our students. Andy, anything you want to say before we hop right in?
Happy Pride, and I'm excited for everybody who is new and willing to learn and support all the LGBTQ and gifted and talented learners out there in the US. Thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. And I've got my love cap on because it really is, this is a labor of love. This is what we do. We care for our community, we care for these kids, and we are doing everything we can to make sure that they're supported and feel seen and heard in schools. So this is our agenda. We'll start with a celebration. So Andy, chat, let us know what's on your Pride playlist. What's a song that you might be jamming out to right now in celebration of Pride, or if just not Pride, just in general? What's a fun song that you got going on right now? And along the way in the presentation, you're going to see quotes from songs that feel relevant to the conversation. So the presentation is set up, the webinar is set up in sections based on the colors of the rainbow flag, the LGBT Pride flag. So I'll explain a little bit of that. We'll be going over the research data, why it matters. We'll talk about what it's like for students currently in school and the challenges they face, as well as the progress that's been made in celebrations, and then just a little tip about how to use pop culture to connect with students. And we'll have plenty of resources for you at the end here. So as you think about our agenda, think about your goal for today's session. Here's just a quick overview of different kinds of things that you can get out of it. Definitely not limited to these four, but maybe you have a particular reason you're here today, and whatever that reason is, we're glad that you're here, and thank you for supporting this work. And being that this is the overlap of gifted and LGBT, humor always works with our kids who are gifted, and so I think one of my colleagues who helped put together this presentation once upon a time that we've adapted for this webinar. So just a funny little thing about Sir Isaac Newton inventing homosexuality, 1669. All right. So like I said, we will be we're structuring the webinar on the colors of the pride flag. So this is the LGBTQ progress flag. This, according to the Human Rights Campaign, this is the most up-to-date universal flag that is being recognized. And it is intersex inclusive, which means that purple circle and the yellow triangle on the left had been added fairly recently. So this particular pride flag, the original pride flag was just the colors, the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and then I'd say, gosh, maybe about 8 years ago, there was the addition of the extra colors in there as well, and so it's been added to, but this is the one that's recognized. So all these have meaning, so they're not just fun colors, not just fabulous colors to look at. Each of these colors have meaning, which we're going to talk about. We're going to structure our webinar around. All right, so first up, we want to um, honor people of color. So here is a quote from Billy Porter, who is just amazing, an amazing entertainer. He has a really, really beautiful song. And this is a quote from that song. So just a nice little touch. If you don't know Billy Porter, I recommend check out some of his music or some of his performances. He's amazing. He's absolutely fantastic. Let's say so. We want to make sure that when we think of gifted and LGBTQ plus, that we're thinking inclusive. So inclusive all around, not just like thinking of one group of students. Like any student from any walk of life can be gifted, of course, or they could be LGBT, or they could have that overlap of gifted and LGBT. So just to honor that, this is a quote from one of my colleagues included. I'm going to let you read it. I want to give you a second to just read this. I think it's really powerful. It's a great way to think about how our kids might feel invisible in school. One of the things I like most about this quote is it says not just individual strength, but a collective understanding. And so this is what we hope to accomplish at the NAGC LGBTQ plus network, is that it's not about individual efforts. It's really about the group efforts. It's about understanding a community and a community building around understanding. So I think it's a really powerful message to hear that sometimes it's inadvertent that we make a kid feel not seen or unsupported in school, and sometimes, unfortunately, it's a little more than unintentional. So this is why we do what we do. So when we think about students who have that overlap of gifted and LGBTQ plus, it is important to, well, let me put it this way. I like to think of it in terms of multi-exceptionality. So we're familiar with twice exceptionality. So a student who's gifted, a student who also has learning disabilities. So classic definition, twice exceptionality. Multiple exceptionalities could be, there could be overexcitabilities in there as well. And more our field is recognizing that students who are culturally or linguistically diverse have a different walk that they have to do in school. And think about a kid as LGBTQ plus has yet another walk that they have to do in school and society and their cultures and whatnot. So there's a lot of code switching that happens. So you've got the gifted code switching, do I let others know like my advanced learning ability, or do I let others know about my learning disability? Do I let them know about my cultural linguistic, or if it's known, then how do I navigate a school environment that is might be geared toward one particular culture or one particular language, and how do you navigate that? Now, put on top of all that, if a kid identifies as, they're gifted and perhaps they have a learning disability and perhaps they're culturally linguistically diverse, now they're LGBTQ plus, that's yet another walk that they have to walk. So a lot of code switching is happening. So there's a lot of brain power that goes into being aware and being like careful who knows what at any one time. We'll talk a little more about that in a minute. Do want to talk a little bit about the trans community as well. This is a fun little song by the Ting Tings, which kind of addresses a serious thing, which is about, call me by my name. Don't call me these other things. I told you what my name is, call me by my name. So that I thought was very important to think about when we think about our trans community. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Just if you've never seen it before, this is just a nice graphic to help understand the differences between gender identity, gender expression, what sex you're assigned at birth, and as well as like physically attracted and emotionally attracted to. So it's a nice, simple, clean, easy to understand graphic that you can use with students if you are ever in a situation where you are teaching students about these things. And that could be found, by the way, on About Kids Health, and it's linked into the slide deck that we are sharing with you as well. All right, so just a quick note about pronouns and names. By now we know pronouns. You'll notice we didn't require you to say your pronoun at the beginning of this webinar. There is a reason for that. We will invite you if you would like to share your pronouns. So I will share mine. Mine are he, him, his. But we don't want to require it. So we want to be careful that we're not requiring someone in a situation, in a group situation, to use their preferred pronouns or just pronouns in general. The reason why we don't want to require that is because for some people, they may be comfortable and they understand who they are. For other people who are still trying to figure it out, or they're in a situation where they may not feel necessarily comfortable or safe revealing their pronouns. You're shining a spotlight on them and asking them to reveal their pronouns. All eyes on them, so just be careful with that. Walk that walk very carefully. Invite people to share their pronouns if they'd like to, but I recommend don't require that. Also, use the pronouns that people tell you. When someone tells you their pronouns, like, that's not a joke. Like, okay, use the pronouns. And if someone has a name they go by other than a name they may be formally identified as when they started school or whatnot, but along the way they're figuring out who they are and they figure out, that's not my name, this is my name. Use their name, and do take that seriously. Don't dead name a student, or don't dead name anybody who tells you what their name is, but you go by a different name. That's not very helpful or safe for that person. And if you don't know someone's preferred pronouns, I can tell you as a language arts teacher, it is perfectly acceptable now to use the pronouns they until you know what someone's pronouns are. So if you just don't know, you can use they and them, and it can refer to one person. Okay. Another quick note about terminology here is LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, there's a big understanding of what those are. People understand these. I want to talk about the Q, queer, and then with that, gender queer and non-binary or gender fluid. So queer and gender queer, and even to some extent non-binary and gender fluid, is kind of a rejection of being put into a label or a classification or whatnot. It's people who feel like, well, I don't fit into that identification. So they may identify as queer, they may identify as genderqueer, they may identify as gender fluid. However, be careful. I know there's a lot of talk lately about the queer community. It has become synonymous with LGBTQ plus, but know this: all queer people are LGBTQ plus. Not all LGBTQ plus people identify as queer. So that's an important distinction to make. The safest umbrella term to use is LGBTQ plus, because there are folks out there who are not comfortable with the term queer because there is a specific identity of queer that means I'm not comfortable with labels or whatnot. These definitions, by the way, we're not making them up. They came from some of the sources below. They're great sources for definitions. It's been really thought through. Stonewall, Human Rights Campaign, etc. I also just want to talk real quick about intersex. So intersex, I just put this in here because it might be sometimes confused or grouped in with queer, or just a term that's not well understood. So that is biological attributes of both male and female, or biological attributes don't fit in with societal assumptions. So there's a biological component to intersex. So just wanted to clarify that. So just be careful. Don't just automatically call someone who's LGBTQ plus queer. Like, it's just better to call them LGBTQ plus. Once they identify specifically who they are, you can ask them if they're comfortable if you call them queer or whatnot. But yeah, just careful with that term. And there's just a shout out, bodily autonomy is a human right. So someone is going through an identification and they're understanding themselves as being trans, that is who they are. And that's what we respect. Same thing with intersex. That's who they are. We respect that. It is a human right. Like, that's not up for debate. Okay. So we're going to get into a bit of the research and data. So the red here represents life. It also represents passion. Here's a classic from Diana Ross. I'm coming out. I want the world to know. one of the great songs. This part is about coming out, but also about, some of the research. Andy, do you want me to do these first couple ones, or do you want to do these?
Yeah, well, we can start with part of the reason why we wanted to show some of this data. And as we had in that first slide of that beautiful phrase about making visible this invisibility that LGBTQ people have to go through life with, we wanted to make sure that people get to catch up with some of the most recent trends in nationally representative surveys and some of the data that have been gathered about LGBTQ individuals. And here we have some of these very interesting breakdowns of how through generations, the number of people who identify as LGBTQ has increased. And on the right side, as we can see, we have the age breakdowns, and voila. Yeah, we have on the upper ages, we have lower percentages, but as soon as we get younger and younger, we have an increasing number of people. And that means that although these nationally representative surveys are only for adults, think about if that trend maintains, how many people in their teens, how many children are identifying themselves in this generation as an LGBTQ member, who are also in our gifted programs, who are also in our schools. So that's why we want to make this visible today. Interestingly, nearly 30% of women now identify within the Gen Z identify as members of LGBTQ community. So think about that as we have increasing population, what kind of supports we can give to these members of the community. We can move to the next, or if you want to comment. Yeah. Also giving some grace. So it means that at this moment, there are more people coming out, there are more people becoming visible, but that also means that there are gaps in ages and generations where people did not have the opportunity to be visible, people who did not have the opportunity to express themselves. So think about that balance, but especially now that we are working with youth, how we can support youth that are increasingly becoming more visible and needing support as they become visible in this environmental, kind of with the environment that has become also increasingly hostile towards LGBTQ population.
Want me to go to the next one?
Yep.
Okay.
So if we think about that increasing number of LGBTQ students, now let's bring that to the research and gifted and talented learners. And we find that there are some interesting trends, although above roughly 6% of the population in the US can be labeled as gifted and talented. Then we had all these very numbers of LGBTQ people. Now think about the intersection, and some of the estimates roughly vary between 10 and 30% according to SEN. So imagine that we are giving more visibility to gifted and talented learners, which is our community. Then we have LGBTQ students, another intersecting community. How can we support both identities? How can we make visible both identities in a society that first discourages and discriminates against LGBTQ people, against gender and sexually orientation diversity, and also a society that has unfortunately become increasingly anti-intellectualism, anti-creativity, anti-thinking and critical thinking. So that balance there is kind of a double layer of difficulty for these teens. Now we have our friend, some research done by Terry. So Terry Friedrichs is one of the founders actually of the LGBTQ community. Thank you for being here. We are very excited to have you here. So overall, gender sexual being is socially constructed, seems favorable for the type of questioning and divergent thinking that gifted children exhibit. So as a gifted child, you have these intellectual intensities, high curiosity, highly motivated to discover and exploring the world, but that's not limited to objects or subjects. That's also inclusive to the self. So these are students that are, or people who have the tools, the cognitive, creative, motivational tools to explore their own identities, to examine fluidity, to question paradigms that society has imposed, to question gender, to question orientations, to question societal norms and rules. So be prepared, because maybe that's one of the reasons why it's also a dual intersection within the gifted population. You have a group of the population that is constantly experimenting and questioning and learning about the self, which might not be the case for straight individuals that are more conforming towards the norms in society. We can move on. This is also kind of, I wanted to use this slide to bring up some of the positives that have happened over the years. So as we saw in the beginning, yeah, over the past, people were less likely to self-identify and to make themselves visible as LGBTQ. That has increased over time. And one of the reasons for that increasing is also due to there is more social acceptance. There is support for same-sex relationships across the country. People have become more accepting of the idea that gender is part of identity, is variable. It can be something that comes down to the individual, not imposed by biology, not imposed by society. There is increasing support for anti-discrimination laws. So we want to make sure that people feel included in society. We want to support whatever needs the individual has, including gender-affirming care. Although there have been a huge increase in anti-LGBTQ policies, there's still a big chunk of the population who rejects these policies and are working against them. And then also we have increasing support of gender and sexual orientation education within schools, although the news tell us the opposite. So this is gathered from Forbes, Gallup, Pew Research polls in 2022, which indicate that there has been some great progress done. However, the progress is not, although the progress has happened across society, there's something happening with schools. And that's when I feel like this is really disappointing, that kids in schools in this day and age perceive that there is a hostile environment. A significant majority of LGBTQ students encounter routinely hostility within the classrooms, especially in the language that they use against LGBTQ people and the overt discrimination and bullying. They feel like there is no safety, and there's also negative educational impact, not only when there is discrimination, but also when they are being invisibilized. If they are not being seen, if they are not being recognized, if their identities are not celebrated, that's a reason to feel that lack of supportive school climate. In general, they claim for support and resources that in liberal states, they might be readily available, but we know that in more conservative states, they are being banned. And finally, the claim for, and there is a clamor for the need to enhancing policies. How can we reverse these negative policies and bring into education systems policies that are actually useful to enhance inclusivity within the schools? The next. You know all about the Don't Say Gay policies that are mining the South in the US, especially in Florida. Well, let's ask ourselves, who wants to say gay? And I built these graphs from a very interesting article and report by Morgan Polikoff and colleagues in University of Southern California. And this is asking actual people, not politicians who are imposing their policies, but asking people how do they feel and what they know about LGBTQ issues. As we can see from the graphs, many of these things come from beliefs, not necessarily actual facts. So a significant number of respondents believe that LGBTQ topics are not being taught in elementary school. So parents, they think these things are not being taught. The things that are being banned are not actively taught. And only roughly 11 to 14% thinks they might be taught, but only in secondary education. If you think about whether people believe that topics about LGBTQ should be taught, there is an increasing number of people who support the idea. Above 20% and for elementary education, and above 40% and 50% for secondary education. If we go on topics on LGBTQ issues, it's exactly the same situation. Parents are okay with learning about it. It is, and here is the dissonance. Although parents and people in general support these topics, the rejection is coming from policymakers and people in power. So how can we reconcile this difference? How can we make sure that although the majority of people really support this, how can we make it into policy and prevent policies to taking over? We can move to the next one.
This one or the next one?
And the next one.
Okay.
And think about also this is some research coming from Lesson, and this one is from 2024, their survey on inclusive learning. So they do see impact in states, especially in schools and school districts that provide inclusive education environments that are holistic and support LGBTQ students. So students over these synthesis of 20 years of research in these places, LGBTQ students thrive. They feel supported. They feel more accepting of that current landscape. And they do feel that there has been progress. They do feel that they can be. This is the summary. If you can check, if you want to check the full report, I can drop the links and you can check on the slides. For the next one, oops, that one jumped. Let's get back to the previous one. Yes. Okay. Also, one of the, oh, yeah. There is. If you're also interested, you can take or share in your community the Clesen School Climate Survey. They do the research every 3 years, and this year is the new iteration. So they have a version in Spanish if you are in states where majority of students might be from Hispanic origin. So consider the possibilities of extending this service and gathering and helping Clesen gather more data to understand what's happening in the schools and to understand how we can best support LGBTQ students. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Andy. And just a great quote here from Dr. Matt Zakreski, who has spoken many times in NAGC and is a key ally for our work here in gifted LGBT support. All right, so real quick, just want to talk about the nature part. So green represents nature on the flag, prosperity and growth. I'm going to lean into the growth here. A little quote from Lady Gaga, very famous quote from Lady Gaga. I was born this way. Great song, great anthem. Every Pride Month, you're going to hear that song ad nauseum, but it's a great song. So Dr. PJ Cedillo out of New Mexico, he did some great digging into what is a gifted LGBTQ plus identity look like for these students. So he's identified 8 stages. I don't know if PJ's here. If you are, PJ, thank you for your work. That's fantastic. And I'll just quickly go through the stages, but one thing PJ wants us to know is that this is all circumstantial. So a kid can be at a higher stage in some circles, some groups, maybe around friends, maybe with a family who supports them. But when they go into other situations where they may feel less supported or less safe, they may move down temporarily the stage of their gifted LGBTQ plus identity. So it's very fluid, it's very flexible. They're also not meant to be solid categories, but it's just kind of a general guide that we want to the best thing that we can do for kids is to get them up to the eighth stage of gifted LGBTQ plus identity, where there's a lot of self-realization. Let's just go through them real quick. So the first one is a discovery, like there's kids starting to discover themselves, and there may be some denial there about who they are or how they feel. And then stage two, once you start working through that, then comes the stress and social isolation and questioning for being a gifted LGBTQ plus TQ plus individual. Then you have the third stage where there could be, oh my gosh, like I'm figuring out who I am, but I'm afraid others um, may know something about me as well, and I'm a little afraid of that. There's a lot of worry here, so there's a bit of questioning, but on the flip side of that, the questioning can lead to self acceptance as LGBTQ. Then we're getting into the middle stages here, stage four, to seeking and discovering others who are similar in intelligence and gender identity. So they're starting to feel comfortable in who they are, and they're seeking out others who may be like them. And then stage five, identity, acceptance, and tolerance. So now really getting more comfortable with who they are. And in the stage six, the socialization with others who are LGBT gifted or gifted and LGBT. So they're really like, this is where they're more out, they're more proud, they're more engaged with the community, and that can lead up to the higher levels here. So stage seven is the positive self-identification, the pride that comes with being LGBT or gifted and LGBT. And then eighth is that self-directed learner in life, living out in the open, autonomous, wanting to be a positive role model to others, a servant to society, so there's just that highest level of visibility and recognition. But again, these are not, these are fluid. So depending on the situation they're in. So for just keep in mind that this could, it's just a good way to think about it, that kids can be anywhere on this scale at any time, depending on the circumstances that they're in. But the idea is that we want to create situations and environments for them so that they can safely move to the higher stages here. Okay, and then shout out again to Dr. PJ Cedillo, who said the least restrictive environment for gifted kids is to be around other gifted kids. Likewise, least restrictive environment for LGBT kids is to be around other LGBTQ kids. So anytime that we can offer opportunities for these kids to recognize one another and build community with one another, it's fantastic. All right. So now we're moving into the healing part. So this is healing. The orange represents healing. It also represents celebrations and friendships. I'm really going to lean into the healing here. One of my favorite songs of all time, Cyndi Lauper, True Colors. I think it was apt then, it's apt now, it's forever. It's just a beautiful, beautiful song. It just encapsulates like what we're trying to do with Pride Month here. It's just to feel seen and heard. Okay, so we're going to get into a little bit of the challenges here. There's a lot more we could say about the challenges, but we do want to recognize the reality for our kids, that the data indicates the kids and teens who are gifted LGBTQ plus are more likely to experience mental health conditions that can impact daily life, which can, on like the extreme end, become a bit of a disability for them as well. They are more likely to have mental health disorders in lifetime. So it could be with mood, depression, anxiety, and they're more likely to experience prejudice or discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. So these are all barriers to competent health. So that's what some of the data has shown in this overlap of gifted and LGBTQ plus. And if you consider kids who are then in hostile environments, who may be bullied, either directly bullied or maybe through policy, like a school policy that is discriminatory for them, that could feel like bullying. And so these are just some examples of what they could be feeling. Some of the challenges that they face. They may overanalyze things. They may struggle to make sense of the cruelty. They may try to fix the situation without help. Right? Think about our gifted kids, right? They often want to like fix things. They think they can figure it all out and get it done by themselves. So it's really important that we recognize the challenges, and some of our kids may not express the inner turmoil they're feeling. So we have to kind of read between the lines. We have to see through the mask they may wear and really get to the heart of what they're feeling and how they're feeling in school. Okay. What NAGC says, so students who gifted in LGBT, instead of embracing one side of their identity, they may end up overcompensating. So they may say, yeah, I'm LGBT, but I really just want to focus on my gifted side in school. And I want to not address the LGBT side, or flip flop. I don't want others to know that I've got some advanced learning ability here, or quick ability to pick up a skill. So I'm just going to lean into my LGBT identity. So it's important that we are nurturing them, so that we are supporting all of their identities, all sides of who they are, not just focusing on one side at a time or whatnot. That we have to just really lean into helping them out. So we have an AGC diversity toolbox, which is linked into the slide that you can take a look at. So how do we help these students? So when they're feeling invisible, we'll create an open, inclusive environment that explicitly welcomes neurodiversity, LGBTQ+, and other walks of life. Like, be explicit about it in your school and learning environments. It's not just like, hey, June's coming up, it's Pride Month, all of a sudden here's a couple books or a poster on the wall. No, it should be consistent throughout the year, that you are helping these students feel seen. They might be their identities are not fully recognized. So either their gifted identity or their LGBT identity is not really fully addressed or whatnot. So, if a student is comfortable, obviously, feel it out with the student, directly address the giftedness, neurodiversity, and LGBTQ+ within your content, whatever your content of what you teach in school. So showcase positive role models is really important. So if you can find, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, how to use pop culture to find positive role models. But that's important. Kids need to be able to see other people, real people's preferred, but if you can find fictional examples as well, that's also helpful for them to see that there are role models out there. They may have unique experiences being gifted in LGBT, which might not be recognized. A lot of the same kind of thing that I was talking about earlier. Another tactic that you can take within your community or within your school is to start a GSA, which traditionally has been called Gay Straight Alliance, but in more recent years has turned into Gender Sexualities Alliance. So openly supports neurodiversity as well. So it's not just about LGBT, but also hey, if you think differently, this is also a group for you. So promote that, support local youth organizations who are doing the work, share resources, talk about it, talk it up. And then we have services and facilities might not be inclusive or accessible. So think about trans kids being denied using the restroom. That can be really challenging for them. So openly and consistently advocate for them. It's not enough to just say, hey, I support you. I know you're trans or LGBT. And then not really say anything. You don't say anything to your colleagues. You don't say anything to district administration or whatnot. Help these kids advocate or advocate for them, because sometimes they may not have the voice or feel comfortable voicing. All right. So the next part, I'm going to speed up a little bit here because I want to make sure that we get to the last part of our presentation. But spirit, purple, is spirit, also known as gratitude. This is a band called A Great Big World, and it's a really fun song. It's called Everybody Is Gay. Look it up if you're not familiar with it. It's a little, when I first started, I was like, it's a little hokey. But then when you start listening, it's this really it's a pep talk kind of song. It's really, really wonderful. It's just this look at hey, maybe we can have a world where this is not a thing at all. Everyone's cool with it. All right. So there's hope. There's hope in our community. So that's the great thing about Pride is there's this challenge that the community, the LGBTQ+ community has faced, continues to face, but there's also hope. There's things happening. So GLSEN is a national rights advocacy organization. They are finding that LGBT youth who attend schools with inclusive curricula, they tend to have higher GPAs, they tend to have greater success and belonging, they tend to be more likely to pursue post-secondary education, promotes long-term well-being and achievement. It's just, there's so much positive toward creating an LGBTQ+ inclusive, especially throw in gifted inclusive environment, and these kids are really going to thrive. So just a quick look. So say you want to do a quick history lesson with kids, maybe the younger kids, or maybe you just have, don't have a great deal of time or whatnot. You could just cherry pick, like I did here, some of the key moments of progress in the United States. And it's pretty similar in other countries as well, like more or less the timeline's kind of the same. The LGBTQ plus rights dates back way further than 1969, but really that was a pivotal moment, right? The Stonewall riots, which a year later turned into the first Pride March. Well, not just marches, multiple cities around the country, and even expanded to the world at that in the early 70s. People were really starting to step up and say something. It was like, hey, stop discriminating against the LGBT population. 1978, the rainbow flag was created. So that could be a fun little fact for kids to know. Like, hey, the rainbow flag, it was during this movement, like it was created as a symbol. And it was really like a symbol. Like to those who knew, great. To those who didn't know, they didn't know. But over time, everyone has come to understand what the rainbow flag is. Then 1988, we had the National Coming Out Day was established. Decade later, Coretta Scott King, who was the widow of Dr. Martin Luther King, she made a statement that LGBT rights are civil rights. And she said that her husband would have been in favor of LGBT rights, which is key. Martin Luther King is just a monumental figure in history. And in 2015, same-sex marriage was legalized. So we're moving in the right direction. You know, as Dr. King once said, the long arc of history bends toward justice, and that's what's happening with LGBTQ plus rights. There are also plenty of things that are happening to be aware of that you could let our kids know about. So October being LGBTQ plus History Month, so a great time to explore that history, that timeline. Within October, there's the National Coming Out Day, International Pronouns Day, Spirit Day, which is an anti-bullying campaign. You have something in March called the International Transgender Day of Visibility. April has the Day of Silence, which has been turned into Rise Up and Take Action Day. And then you have multiple organizations, including ours, NAGC, who are advocating for the rights of these students to feel safe and included. Also, in law, Title IX supports you and your students for teaching them about LGBTQ plus and supporting them as LGBTQ plus. It's written into law. So Title IX here specifically says schools cannot create policies that treat gay, lesbian, transgender students differently from other students. So it's there. However, yesterday, very frustratingly, President Biden's Title IX law expanding protections for LGBTQ plus students dealt another setback. So I linked in the news story here. You can just look it up because it's a very recent story. But there's the work continues. It never ends. Like it's just a constant progression of work that has to be done. And keep in mind that our kids who are LGBT and gifted, these kids are worldly aware. These kids are aware of what's happening policy-wise. They're aware of the challenges that not only they face in their own lives, but the community faces, the nation faces, the world faces. So that's just something to keep in mind that the work is never done. So moving into the last stretch of our webinar here, blue represents harmony, serenity, and even artistry. This quote here is by Muna. Well, I say she, I don't 100% know for sure if she identifies as she, but she has a female sounding voice. Really interesting artist. I did not know much about her. They wrote this song after the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016. And really strong like message here, just it's about coming together, finding peace. Like, can we stop with the violence already? Like it's a beautiful song. All right, so how do you support a student's coming out process? So if you got a kid who's ready to come out to you, bunch of advice here. I'm just gonna highlight a couple here to save time here, but thank them because they're trusting you and they're telling you. Listen to what they have to say. Reassure them that you care about them. If you are struggling with the idea of being their support system, to get support for yourself, there's plenty of books, organizations, videos you could watch to help support you, or just find other people who can help support you as well. But just understand, coming out is not typically a single conversation. It's not a once and done thing. It's not typically universal. So they may be coming out to you and certain people or certain social circles, but they may not be out in all circles. So you have to be careful. Like, someone comes out to you, don't just start blaring it to everyone you know. Like, check with that person to see, hey, do you want others to know, or do you just want me to know, that kind of thing. And avoid, ignoring them. Like if they come out to you, that is a monumental step especially for a kid or a teenager. Don't ignore them. Like don't just brush it aside. Don't dismiss them by saying something like, "Oh, I knew it," or it's just a phase. Avoid doing anything that may make the kid feel unwelcome or like, "Oops, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have told you." Like you don't want to put that vibe out to them. So just be there for them. Language matters, so you do want to make sure that you are modeling inclusive language, encouraging gender neutral language, using empowering language. So some examples here. Say you're a teacher in a high school. It's not uncommon, as kids start experimenting with dating or whatnot, that you might ask, "Oh, who's your boyfriend? Who's your girlfriend?" Don't make assumptions about who they're seeing. So the safe thing to say is, "Are you seeing someone?" Or if you have your own child that or you suspect may be, going through an identity process of their own, you can help guide them by saying, "You're my child," or "I love you because you're my child," rather than using son-daughter terminologies, because you're giving them that in that lets them know, okay, it's kind of in my ballpark to define who I am as the child of my parent. Rather than saying boys and girls or guys when you're addressing a room, and this is very easy. I still slip into calling a group of people, "Hey guys," use students or hello people or wonderful people or things like that. I have a colleague who says human beings. She just goes, "Hey humans." Just a terminology that's not gender specific. Again, if this is more of an elementary thing, if you're sometimes in a classic, I know this happened a lot when I was in school. We divide into boys versus girls, and think about a kid who may not feel like they fit into like either boy or girl, or they don't want others to know that they're feeling like they don't fit into one or the other. So to avoid that, making them feel awkward in that moment, say count off by ones and twos. So one's on this side, two's on that side, and do whatever the activity is. Rather than "Are you dating?" Or "Why aren't you dating?" Just say "When you choose to date," or "If you choose to date." Do you like anyone? Rather than "Don't you like anyone?" So, just little switches to your language makes a big difference. And a lot of these are just clues and keys to kids that who are paying attention. They're like, "Okay, I understand this is a more inclusive kind of thing." Most importantly, "You matter to me. I care about you no matter what." Like that's a powerful, powerful statement to say to a kid, especially if they have felt comfortable to come out to you. All right, so allyship and support for gifted LGBTQ plus youth. So just be aware of biases. We all have biases. Be aware of your biases. Think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The classic, safety is that initial stage everyone's got to be in. You got to feel safe in order to learn, in order to do something, in order to be productive. If someone doesn't feel safe because they're in an environment that doesn't support them intellectually as a gifted student, or doesn't support them social emotionally as an LGBTQ plus person, then they're kind of stuck in that safety mode of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so, we can help pull them out of that by checking your biases and checking other people's biases as well. Promote resources and visibility days. One of my colleagues, Jennifer Gottschalk, has a link in here, a lot of resources that you can use, which, in the interest of time, I'm not going to show you here, but you do have these slides. And build allyship and advocacy. So it may just start with you, and then you find one person who you can start having conversations with, like, "Hey, what are we going to do to change minds? What are we going to do to make this school more inclusive, or this learning environment more inclusive?" So the two become a group, or just becomes some, right? Just a few people, then that becomes a group, and then eventually that becomes a movement. So it's okay to start small, and it might take some time, but it's anything that you do can help. Advocate for safe and inclusive schools. You can start a GSA at your school or in your community. Even better if you make sure that people know it's a neurodiverse friendly GSA. So if you think outside the box, if you're a gifted learner, if you are receiving special ed services, like this place is for you as well. Support community efforts. So you go into a store and you see that they have a pride display, then make sure you let the employees know and let the manager know, hey, I like your pride display. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for carrying these books in a library or at a bookstore or whatnot. Just make a little bit of an effort to let them know that that's appreciated and seen. And of course, because our gifted kids are gifted kids, a lot of them enjoy humor. So humor helps. So they really are aware of all the negativity that happens in the world, and especially if they're LGBTQ plus, that can be directed at them. So humor goes a long way to healing, and it helps build relationships. All right, so nearly at the end here, just some tips for advocacy. Train your people, advocate in meetings with colleagues and superiors. We heard, where I work, we heard a really good quote that if you're not invited to the table, then bring your folding chair to the table. Like, just make sure that you are speaking up when it is needed. Develop and support gifted LGBTQ plus student leadership. So again, GSA, if your school or district has an equity group, get involved in that. Help students be aware that those things exist. Pride, take advantage of things that we have built in, Pride Month and LGBTQ plus History Month. Make that an awareness piece. Build public and consistent. Be public and consistent in your support of advocacy and visual representation. So don't just, one time, hey, I said that I support LGBT rights at a staff meeting, but I haven't really done anything or said anything since, and been kind of quiet. So you just, be consistent. If you say you're an advocate, then be an advocate. Obviously, as educators, we want to enforce anti-bullying policies. Do not look the other way. Do not look the other way when the system or the laws or whatever it is finding a way to be biased against our kids who are gifted and LGBT. Like, do not look the other way. Challenge that. Also, act with kindness, of course. Lots of other great ideas from the Teachers Union, the GLSEN, Trevor Project. Again, you can start or join an educator group, and of course, NAGC LGBTQ plus network. This is what we do, and you can join us through Engage as well. All right, and the last stretch here, as we start to wrap things up, vitality, which is bringing energy and new ideas to the table. So in the spirit of new, I looked up what's a song that's gaining ground that was released very recently. This song was released this year. I don't know this artist. I don't really know this song, but I heard the song. I was like, oh, it's interesting. Like, it really speaks to the living in neon. So they're referencing the rainbow colors and whatnot. So, look for these little moments in pop culture, which is what I'm going to talk about in just a second, that can connect with kids, because our kids are paying attention to pop culture. They are aware of what's happening out there in the world. So for instance, LGBTQ plus representation. This is just a sampling of things recently in pop culture that kids who are LGBT and kids who are gifted, they're going to be aware of these things. They're going to be aware of the rumor about the Star Wars character Ahsoka being LGBT. Stranger Things as a character who is going through a really interesting progression through the seasons where he's identifying as gay. Keep in mind, this series takes place in the 1980s, so it's a very different environment now, and he's really struggling with his feelings toward his friend and having to keep all this inside in secret. So these are great discussion points. Recently, Disenchantment, which is an animated show, had their main character come out as lesbian, and she found love. And on and on and on. There's one of the incarnations of Robin from Batman and Robin is openly gay. Disney Pixar did a really interesting short about a gay couple. I think it's only like 7-ish minutes long, but it's really cute. It's well done. So on and on and on. Like, there are more and more and more representation happening now. Like, it was kind of a big deal just, what was it now? 4 years ago, when in one of the Disney Pixar movies, a character who's only on screen for literally 20 seconds made a comment that her girlfriend at home said blah 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 blah, and that had never been said in a Disney movie before. And now there's all kinds of representation in Disney movies about trans and lesbian and gay. So it's great. It's wonderful. So our kids are paying attention to this. So if you pay a little bit of attention to this as well, not just from movies, but books, comic books, like Better Nate Than Ever is a great read, no matter what age a kid is. Red, White, and Royal Blue was recently had a pop in popularity. So these are just great examples. They're great things for kids to see and understand. Same thing with neurodiversity. Billie Eilish, pop superstar, she said she struggles with what's anxiety? Oh my gosh, why am I drawing a blank? I forget what it is right in this moment. I can't believe I forgot that. But she's struggling with something that is definitely neurodiverse. Everything Everywhere All at Once, really, really cool movie. If you've ever seen it, it's never explicitly stated that the main character is neurodiverse, but if you know, you know. Like you look at her, you're like, yeah, she's definitely like in her own world a lot of the time. So there's a lot of characters. Dory from Finding Dory or Finding Nemo. Lots of characters that kids can relate to. They understand. The whole point here is that they're great conversation pieces. Even in social media, there's plenty of social media that kids are tuning into that inform them about gifted identity and LGBTQ identity. This was a display at a Pride festival, a local Pride festival here in Colorado. One of the libraries came out and displayed some of the books that they have. They had 2 bins filled with books that people could check out right there on the spot. So there's lots and lots of books that you can use. So as we wrap up, I know we only have a few minutes. Just be aware of your school board's policies, be aware of the local laws and guidelines around inclusion. Sometimes this could be anti-bullying policies, sometimes it's somewhere else. Educate yourself, speak up, speak out, advocate, be an ally, and be more than an ally, be an advocate. And think about what do you need to know to get fabulous support for your students? What do you need to do to achieve fabulous support for all students? And also, if you haven't done it already, go ahead and make your Pride playlist. We're only about halfway through Pride. We have here a ton of resources that you're welcome to explore. Lots of resources. Some of them are kid friendly. There we go. Light just went out on me. So on behalf of Gifted Youth Everywhere, thank you for all that you do. You can email me, you can email Andy, you can join our LGBTQ plus network here at NAGC. And tomorrow's Juneteenth, so happy Juneteenth, everyone. I'm really happy that became a holiday. But thank you for your time. We appreciate you. Were there any questions that we missed?
We don't have any questions, but if anyone feels free, wants to continue the conversation, feel free to reach out over Engage, the official platform at NAGC. So reach out and we can keep the conversation going. Thank you very much for all you do.
Yes, thanks for being here. We appreciate you
I
spending the
want to
time.
give a big thank you to Doug and Andy for putting on this presentation. We really appreciate them volunteering their time. Doug, we did have a question about if they could share the slides with other colleagues. Are you open to that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, awesome.
I think
Okay,
Terry
we're
has a question.
just about, oh, there's Terry. Hi. Do you have a question, Terry? Let's see if we can get it to work. You have to connect to the audio.
And Terry, if you can't get the audio working, feel free to reach out, email me, or go through Engage. We can chat there as well.
Excellent. Okay, well, we are just about out of time too. So appreciate everybody who joined us for this webinar. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.